Hey everybody, it's Matt here, and today we're doing another episode of TG Tutorials. And in this episode, I'm going to teach you how to record PSP, yes that's right, PSP footage. Do not adjust your dial, do not look at the thumbnail again, I mean you could, do not look at the title of the video again, it's all accurate. PSP footage through your Elgato. Now, before we move on to what you need and how to do it, which is the usual format of these tutorials, I want to mention just a very quick, very important announcement for all of you watching this right now. I know that emulation exists. It's true. Now I know I have all these right here, these console, these handhelds. But yes, I know that emulation exists, all right? I use the computer. I do the clackety-clack. I use Google and Goggle and Bong. I know, okay? I get it. I do. But sometimes either you have a really awful laptop or you don't even have that good of a tower. I mean, for the longest time I had like a 10-year-old PC. Yeah, couldn't really emulate past Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. Even on these laptops, I still can't. So, if you have a capture device, you want to capture some PSP footage, okay? So, I just want to put that out there because I know I'm going to get comments that immediately are going to be like, but emulation. Yes, people know, emulation. Awesome, love it. But we're not talking about that right now. So either way, everybody, now that you're upset with me, let's move on to what you need to get this thing done. So the first thing you're going to need is a PSP. Now, I know you're probably thinking, Matt, I know this. I'm here. I got to this part of the video, and I get it, but I want to mention this because you need a PSP 2000 or 3000, not a 1000. Now, if you're wondering, well, what's the difference between a 1000, 2000, and 3000? Well, I did a video on that, another episode of TG Tutorials that will be either linked in the description box down below or will be at the upper right-hand corner. If you are trying to buy a PSP to do this, definitely check out that video. If you already have one and you know whether or not it's a 1, 2, or 3000, disregard that, but still wanted to mention it just in case because the 1000 only works with AV cables, specifically Sony AV cables, and it only outputs video and audio and also pictures as well. Stuff that is located on the SD card. So you just got to make sure that you don't get a 1000. And the second thing you'll need are component cables. Now, as you can tell, I went first party, and the reason why is because, funnily enough, first party cables are not that expensive right now. They're not the GameCube component cables that A, only work on Japanese systems, and B, will cost you a literal arm and a leg. Thankfully, these were, and you can tell they're sealed, a little dusty, but sealed, were only a little over $20 on eBay. So definitely don't spend crazy amounts of money on this if you can. But if for some reason, by the time you're watching this, they are crazy amounts of money, you can go third party with both component cables and HDMI. Now, I don't own third party component or HDMI cables, so for the purposes of this tutorial, we are using these. However, I would not imagine that going third party, at least with component cables, would be all that different in this tutorial. So even if you have third-party component cables, keep on watching this. They should work the exact same way, but still definitely wanted to mention, yes, I'm using first party here. B, they were also, was there an A? Either way, B, they were also very inexpensive. And also make sure that if you are trying to look up third-party component cables, you can go extremely cheap, but also make sure that if you're going for a company that has them for maybe like $8, $15, $20, something like that, make sure that they're actually making them themselves and not just buying the $3 cables and trying to mark them up for a profit. If you're gonna get the same thing anyway, just go directly to the source and get those $3 cables. Normally I would, but in this case, especially because I'm doing a tutorial and everything, I wanted to try to get the best cables possible, and of course because I want to record these in the best quality possible without going too crazy with something like a FrameMeister or something like that. So again, first party can be pretty cheap if found for the right price, and that's what I went for the purposes of this tutorial. And the next thing you'll need, of course, is your Elgato. But Remember though, if you're trying to look for one of these online and you're getting it third party, that's totally fine. That's how I got mine. But you need to make sure that you get a few other things just to make sure that you're not looking at this thing and then looking at this tutorial and going, uh-oh, I'm missing a decent chunk of what I need to get this thing to work. So first things first, make sure that you have a USB cable that is shaped just like this. And the other side will be a typical USB cable that goes into your computer, but it's shaped just like this. Now, it's not proprietary, thankfully. You can find it elsewhere, but you do definitely need one to plug into your Elgato so that the signal can transfer into the Elgato. Now, another thing you'll need as well are an HDMI cable. One, actually, thankfully not two, but you will need one, which might seem a little odd because we are using component, but still it will become relevant a lot later. Now, you also need a cable that goes into your Elgato. This is proprietary, so you do need to buy it off of Elgato's website if you don't end up getting it in a bundle. Thankfully, I was able to get it in a bundle with the system itself when I purchased it secondhand on eBay. And definitely make sure to snag the software for the Elgato directly through Elgato's website, which you can see right now. And for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll be using the Windows version, but you can get other versions as well. If you need to get the Mac version, get the Mac version, but I don't know how they might differ, how the install process might differ, so definitely keep that in mind as we're doing the rest of this tutorial. And the last thing you'll need is a monitor, either your TV monitor, a separate monitor for your PC, something that allows you to plug in HDMI, so you can't be using an old CRT, sadly. And now that you know what you need, let's move on to how you get it done. So before we move on to the software, let's look at the Elgato itself. So as you can see, it says AV in here and HDMI in here. So we do need to plug in that cable that I mentioned before that allows you to plug in component cables into the AV in section. AVE? No, the AV in section. But you do need to make sure that it is secure. Now you might be thinking, oh, I plugged it in just fine. I don't want to break it. And don't get me wrong, I don't want it to break either. But you do need to push it in a little bit harder than you're probably thinking. The reason why is because for some reason this port is a little bit more jiggly than I would like it to be. So definitely plug that in securely. If there's any problems with video and output a little bit later, it might be due to the fact that this isn't plugged in properly. Now, turn the Elgato around and you can see that there is the USB port right there. Like I mentioned before, you need that USB cable plugged in there and the other side plugged into your PC or your laptop, whatever you have. And also you can see right there that it says HDMI out. And now let's move on to the software. So let's hope that you installed it, and let's double click right here and see what we get. So after booting the program, if your preview video screen looks like this, then you've definitely done something wrong, but that's okay, because if we go to this icon right here and we actually open up this window right here, you can go to input device and change it from, in this case, Nintendo Switch to the correct input device, which is actually not other. You would think it is, but it's actually PlayStation 3. Now you can tell right here that under video it says component, and it's actually grayed out because we can't choose anything else. So I assume because we're using component cables, the Elgato assumes that we're actually using a PS3. Now you can see that there's allow 60 frames per second, and also the profile, which has HD 720, and the quality right there. I'm going to leave everything as is for now. We're actually going to get back to it later, but let's actually click OK. And when we do, it still says no single, but signal, not single. A little tongue-tied today. But what does matter is that we actually have to go to the PSP itself. So let's do a little picture-in-picture. And now that we have the PSP on, let's actually go over to the settings tab. And once we do, you can see that I already have this highlighted. I was checking it out before. So click on that. And then you realize that we actually have to output the video manually to the Elgato, which of course will then go to your television. Takes a little bit, but as you can see, it is working. So that is great. Now let's take the PSP off the screen, and you can tell it's a little laggy for me because I'm also trying to record this footage as well, both the screen and the PSP footage. So I'm actually going to go to the enable preview button and click on that so that I could kind of speed things up on my end. And if for some reason on your end it's a little bit laggy, even though the recordings are fine, then definitely disable that preview as well. Also, speaking of recording, let's actually go over to this red button right here. That is the record record button, as it reads right there. That is to snap photos. I would suggest doing that though in a video player or video editing software of choice. That mutes the audio, but specifically it mutes the display audio. So you could just mute your computer, but if you are trying to do this live, you should definitely mute this preview audio so that you don't have it playing both on your computer and on your monitor. Speaking of going live, there is a green stream button right here. So if you want to go live through Twitch, as you can see right there, you should definitely go there. Now, also, there's commentary. See that blue button right there? That allows you to do commentary either live or pre-recorded. I would suggest just doing it later so that you don't have it overlaid onto the video permanently, but you do you. Now, looking at the right-hand side of the screen, you actually can log into your Twitch from here. Also, you can go down to game audio. Personally, I leave it at 70%, but you could easily put it just down to 0 if you don't want any game audio. But I would suggest keeping it in some capacity, because even if you think you don't need it now, you might need it later. Of course, if you're going live, mess with it as need be. But personally, as someone who records this footage in advance, I always like to have it there just in case I can mute it in any video editing software I have. I don't really mess with live commentary because I don't go live on Twitch through the Elgato, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And as you can see, I haven't even changed the default migrate capture naming scheme here. And the reason why is because I usually just put any game in, any of the games that I record in one huge folder anyway. So I don't want to have to, in the off chance I switch from one game to another, have to rename the game every time. So before I mention that we get back to this window right here, so let's talk about it right now. Not the capture part necessarily, but let's actually go over to picture. And I just want to give you guys a fair warning, do not mess with any of these settings. Now, you could if you want to just quickly test something out before actually recording any video, but if you're going to be recording video, even if you're going live, don't mess with any of these settings. If you want to kind of change any of these, just mess with them through a video editing software, because if you do it through the Elgato, it's going to be on your video forever. Audio is just that, audio, nothing really to mess with here unless you're going live, in which case, have at it. I don't really mess with the profile section, so I can't really talk much about that, but the advanced section is actually very, very important, especially with this tutorial. We'll get to that a little bit later, but just talking about it right now, though, if for some reason your screen is flickering when you're recording anything through the Elgato, not just PSP footage, but any kind of video game footage, then if it's specifically flickering on your monitor, on your television, not so much in the preview window, but if it is flickering, definitely mess with this bar right here and see if it's some kind of issue with your TV and your compatibility with the Elgato itself. So definitely mess with it if you need to, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'm actually going to turn the preview window back on, and the reason why is because I actually want to show you how you can change up the aspect ratio within the Elgato. Not really a problem for me. I know that for some people these black bars on the left and right hand screen side of the screen might be a problem, but really I can just shift that and change that any way I want to in my video editing software of choice. But if you want to, you can actually look in the capture section right here. You can either convert this to standard image, or you can actually stretch the image if you like. And for me, again, not really a big issue. You can also go into the PSP itself, and by doing that you can actually change it to 4:3 or 16:9. Again, whatever you prefer. Personally, it doesn't really matter to me either way. Before we move on to gameplay footage, I actually want to show you how this looks on my television screen. Now, you might notice that it's actually extremely stretched out. You're probably thinking, Matt, what's going on? Is this normal? Maybe for you it actually is not stretched out. It's actually the normal aspect ratio. And the reason why is because I actually went to custom and I stretched the image out. Now, when it comes to the menu screen, it looks extremely stretched out. Yes, of course, we're looking at this right now. But when you actually go into some gameplay footage, so let's actually go to custom. Let's put it into the normal aspect ratio. Let's change it back there, and then let's go to some gameplay footage. I'm actually going to be playing SmackDown vs. Raw 2006. Really good game. Iffy on the PSP, but I really did enjoy it on the PlayStation 2. Now let's actually skip ahead. Let's actually go to the menu screen of SmackDown vs. Raw, and as you can tell, it does not look good. And when I say look good, I mean that there are huge, and I mean huge black bars. And while that's not affecting the footage on the Elgato, it still sucks. So that's actually why I went to custom and I just blew the whole dang thing up. So I would suggest doing that as well, but you might actually notice as we're looking at this, there's some weird flickers on the screen. And that is where the TV compatibility comes into play that I mentioned earlier. Now, if for some reason that isn't helping anything, then there's a good chance that your PSP is actually on low battery and you do need to charge it. So when your PSP is on low battery, it does flicker like that, I assume, because it's trying to tell you, hey, you have low battery. Charge your PSP. So I'm going to try to charge my PSP and see if that helps it, but I have heard that that can be an issue. So let's jump back to some gameplay footage for a second. As you can see, it's Undertaker versus Edge, just randomly on Monday Night Raw. You know, always just happens all the time, every day. So I actually, as you can tell, the screen is pretty small, so it does, in a sense, reflect how it does look on your television screen. But hey, again, in your video editing software, whatever you use, you can actually just blow it up and it'll be just fine. Yes, you can still, like I mentioned before, go into the settings and maybe make it a little bit bigger, but personally, I don't really care, at least in this specific tutorial. I'm sure I'll mess with it later with some settings if I want to, but really it's PSP footage either way, so I don't mind making it a little bit bigger in post. But what does matter is that it doesn't look too bad, honestly. Yeah, you can tell that it's a little laggy, but that's really because of my own personal laptop. This laptop isn't that good, so it's recording footage on top of displaying this footage, so that has nothing to do with the actual PSP footage itself. Can't play the audio right now, but there are no issues with the audio both on my television and on the Elgato itself. So let's jump back to me in front of the shelf. So as you can tell, not that difficult. Doesn't look the best though. So yes, emulation wins this round. But again, if you don't have a PC or a laptop that can emulate, this is the best that you can do. You make do. And honestly, it's interesting because again, we're using the official PSP Sony component cables, so yeah, this is as good as it could get at the time. Either way, though, thank you all so much for watching as always. Please remember to like and subscribe if you liked the video, and if you didn't like the video, as always, you can still like and subscribe either way. I won't judge you for it. Also, comment down below with any questions, concerns, comments, 1-800 how's my gaming, any of that, please, down below. Would love to hear what you all have to say. And at this point, yes, if you want to make some emulation jokes, that's fine. But I just wanted to make sure that we really got down that I totally get what emulation is. Okay? I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that and got that out of the way before we got the actual concerned people that are like, Sir, 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 do you know about sir, sir? Okay, everybody. Love you all. Take care. Tune in next time. See ya.